from your PHLV radio family, Merry Christmas and all the best in the coming year.
Merry Christmas from your friends at PHLV Radio.
Just like a friend from back home. This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
Welcome to the award-winning podcast, Smart People Travel Wise, a platform where we discuss all things about travel. I'm your host, Tennie Sumague, coming to you from my job, the library, here in my hometown of Queens, New York. And today, since it's Travel Tuesday, we are going to discuss something a little bit more educational, and it has nothing to do with my background, but this is something that a lot of travelers like myself need to be educated on, which is the perks of travel credit cards. And I have a very special guest host who specializes this as his profession. But before I introduce him, I like to remind everybody, if you are watching this live, please hashtag live. And if you are watching this on replay, hashtag replay. Make sure you tell us where you're coming from so we can acknowledge all of you. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and YouTube. You can also listen on Amazon Fire, Spotify, iHeartRadio. What else is there? Oh, Apple Podcasts, or you could simply download the PHLV radio app available on all iOS and Android phones. So I'd like to introduce to you my guest host, Eli Facenda, who is a travel entrepreneur who does this, who educates people on the perks or the how to use travel credit cards wisely. So without further ado, please smash those heart buttons as I introduce you, Eli, to our podcast. Good afternoon, Eli. How are you doing?
Doing great. Excited to be here with you guys, Tennie, and to share a little about what's a really cool kind of game and system and cool way to travel with credit card points and really maximizing these purchases you're probably already making and credit cards you're already going to use. So why not take it and run with it and have a little bit of fun? So I'm excited to dive in with you today and explore what that can be like for the listeners.
And for travelers, this is probably a great way where you can actually save and utilize, the points, the perks of it. And from what I'm learning too, is like a lot of credit cards have a different system too. So first, tell us more, the purpose of travel cards first, especially for those who are just starting out the world of travel, or just like looking for just a credit card to use when they travel.
Yeah, great. Well, Tay, I think what could be helpful is I can kind of give people an understanding of how the whole landscape, the whole world of credit cards and travel points works. And then I can share a couple a little bit of detail around that. We'll dive in a little more. But to start from a high level, guys, what's really cool is there's these cool relationships between banks where you get credit cards and then airlines and hotels that have loyalty programs, right? And so when you think about it, if you travel on a flight or you stay in a hotel, you've probably heard about these loyalty programs where you can earn points, just like any other, store, even like Costco or something. You can earn these points and you can use those for different values. Now with travel, there's this really cool opportunity to use these points at way, way, way better value than really any other type of loyalty program ever offers. And we'll explain what that means. But there's opportunities you can have where you're going to take money that you're already spending, put those purchases on the right cards, and use those points to get amazing first-class tickets, luxury hotel stays, really limitless amounts of travel if you do it right. And so I'll explain how that works. But what's important to understand to start is that every dollar that you spend, whether you own a business and you have to spend on credit cards, or you're just shopping for groceries or buying normal day-to-day items or whatever it may be, you can be earning points, and you can use those points to get a ton of free travel experiences. So what you want to know is, if I use points well, by earning points on the right credit cards, I can actually start to travel either more or take more people on trips or get better quality trips or take the trips I've been dreaming of, I've never gotten. So you can do all that stuff simply by using the right types of cards on different purchases. So that's kind of the high level to start with, and we can kind of dive into some details from there.
Well, I will tell you, I actually had two travel cards, and I did that. I purchased those one after I graduated, only because there's the ad like, oh, you could free like use it for your travel, and I'm an avid traveler. I had, I think, the Bank of America one and the City Advantage, and I didn't use it correctly. I'll tell you, which gave me this whole phobia of having to use credit cards. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is there's a way that you have to use it correctly, which is probably one of the things that a lot of I would say a lot of young travelers, I mean, like I said, I purchased I applied for these cards when I was in my early, like literally after I graduated college, not realizing the discipline that goes into using travel credit cards, but for somebody who's actually looking into these, to use these credit cards, what is probably the first things they have to learn rather than just purchasing and, just use it for whatever.
Yeah, so I like to break things into a few steps. So the first, I'll kind of lay out the steps. We can talk about each one if we want to, but the first step is going to be to optimize your credit score and report and understand the fundamentals of how credit works. That's number one, because if you don't have a good score, you're not going to get approved for things anyways. And then if you don't know how this works, you're going to basically be starting to get credit cards, and you're not going to know, is this going to negatively impact my credit? Is it going to positively impact it? How do I actually keep my credit score good while doing this? So that's the first step. Then you want to start to make sure that you're earning the right types of points. And then from there, you want to maximize how many of those points you earn. And then the fourth step is going to be use those points for optimal value. And the last step is how do you create a good system to keep it all organized? So that's kind of the overview of like the steps I like to walk people through. But that first one is what you're talking about, which is understanding the foundations of credit. So the first thing you need to know is like the different credit scores and the way that your credit score is impacted by getting new credit cards. So for example, there's 5 factors of credit. Right, there's payment history is your main it's the highest percentage. Then there's utilization. Then you have average age. Then you have what's called credit mix, which is like how many different types of credit cards or loans or mortgages you have. And then you have new credit, which is how many new cards you get. So one of the common misconceptions that people have is if I get a new card, it's going to crush my credit score or it's really going to hurt me. Well, in fact, that factor of credit is actually the least important one, right? The new credit factor, whereas building on-time payments is the most. So for most people, they actually need to establish more credit. They need to have more on-time payments over time. So it actually will help them in the long run to get more cards, but they want to do it slowly and smartly over time. So that's kind of some of the fundamentals when I talk about understanding how credit works. You need to know that stuff so that when you do decide, hey, should I get 1 card or 2 cards or maybe even 3 cards? What's the right time to get them? How should I be thinking about applying and all that stuff? And so once you kind of have some of those fundamentals understood, then you want to figure out what are the right types of points to earn, because there's all these different programs. You want to think of these like currencies. So you want to think like, okay, a Citibank point is different than a Chase point, which is different than an American Airlines mile, which is different than a Marriott point, right? So these are all these different currencies, and you want to figure out which ones are the best for you, which we could talk about some of the best ones that I like. But that's kind of the philosophy and the thinking you want to apply when you go to do this. You could just get a random card, but again, since not all points are equal, not all currencies are really equal, you might earn a lot of points in the wrong currency. It's kind of like having, would you rather have $100 or 100 Mexican pesos? It's like, well, of course, you'd rather have $100, but if you don't know the values of the two, you might pick pesos and not realize that that's way worse, right, in terms of just intrinsic value. So that's kind of how you want to think about it. And hopefully that gives you some ideas to get the gears churning around how you can actually optimize this stuff.
That's interesting that you say it's like currencies, like, the value of $100 to 100 Mexican pesos. So you have to kind of know what credit card is worth, the value of the different kinds of credit cards. But I'm also wondering, what a person's credit line, or I should say, the credit, what do you call this? What is this? The point, not points. Help me out here.
The credit, their score.
The credit score. What should travelers, or say consumers, like how low should their credit score be if they want to, let's say if they have low credit or if their credit mediocre, like how low should their credit score be in order to to apply for any specific.
Right. Yeah. Well, where should their score be in order before they start to apply? Really, is like what you're asking. Right? So yeah. So really, you want to think about this. There's different ranges of credit, right? And then there's different types of cards you can get approved for based on your credit score. So think of it this way, right? From a bank's perspective, banks are here. They're a business that's designed to lend money. A credit card is one form of lending. If you were lending money, you think about it logically, it starts to make sense. If you were lending money, who would you want to lend to? Well, you'd want to lend to the people that are the most trustworthy. And how does a bank assess trustworthiness? They assess it based on your credit score, which is essentially your financial reputation. So the nicest cards with the best benefits and all that stuff are going to be reserved for people with the highest credit scores. It kind of makes sense. Like if you had a really nice car that you were going to lend to a friend and you had a bunch of cars and you're giving to a bunch of friends, you'd give the nicest car to the person who you know is going to take the best care of it, right? And so that's kind of how it works with credit too. These high-end cars that have all these cool perks and lounge access and can get you first-class flights and top status with hotels and all that stuff, those are generally going to be higher-end cards, which means you want to have at least around a 700 to 720 credit score. There are tiers below that where you could get like a 650 to 700 credit score. You can get cards in that, and those will still earn some points. Now, they're not going to have as many perks and benefits to them, but they can still earn you points. If you're below 650, it's going to be really hard to earn any credit card or to get approved for any credit card that earns any sort of really decent travel points. You can get some cards that get maybe cash back or earn points that aren't really very valuable at that point. But the idea would be if you're below 650, really if you're below 700, you should really focus on getting your score above 700 first in order to do that. And there's a bunch of ways to do that. But the first thing is you need to understand, again, how does a credit score work? What's missing on your credit report to make the score higher? So for a lot of people, they might just not have a lot of credit. So one thing you could do, this is a huge hack, is you can do what's called the authorized user strategy. And so what this would do is it allows the history from someone else's card, one individual card, to show up on your report. So they would go into their account and add you as an authorized user. Okay, so now let's say they've had that card for 20 years and has all these on-time payments. It's got a high credit limit. It's got all this stuff. They would add you to that card. That card will now show up in your credit report. So it looks like instead of having 2 years of on-time payments, now you've got 12. Okay. And so that's a big difference for your credit score. Now, the key part of that strategy is that just because they add you, their credit on that card will impact you, but you can't impact them back. Right. So there's no risk to them as long as they don't actually give you the physical card. Right. Because they're going to get it in the mail. They just don't give it to you. And then all of a sudden, boom, the history shows up on your credit report and now your score goes up. So that's a long way of saying if you're below 700, you should really focus on getting your score higher by doing things like getting more credit and slowly establishing that, or getting an authorized user in your report and working on improving your score, making sure you understand the fundamentals of credit. And then you start to apply for some of these travel cards. I would not start applying for these if you're like below 700. It's just not a good idea. And you really want to focus on getting better credit first.
That's interesting because also my father was a CPA. He worked in Wall Street for Goldman Sachs, and he was very strict, and he always emphasized that you have to have a good credit history, and he was very meticulous, especially with me, because I'm naive and I will just look at every credit card that, all I wanted to do was spend, right? Travel. But he did own an American Express card, but there's a reason why for that too, because and that's actually one of my goals as to first get, like what you said, get my credit score up to above 700, which is almost there. But yes, it's interesting that you said that, that it's so important that you have to have a specific credit credit score to get the best out of those credit cards. And now I want to ask you first, for somebody who's maybe is new at this, or and wants to purchase a credit card, and because there's also there's also these annual fees, and I think that's one of the things that I'm really curious about, because why are some credit cards there's some that have zero. I believe that's I think Discover and Capital. I'm not sure if it's Capital One, but I know some have zero, some have 95, some have 550. So yeah. How does annual fees work?
Sure. So basically the way that there's basically zero annual fee cards with every bank, actually. It's just, again, going to be the perks and benefits. A card that has no fee is generally going to have less benefits and perks than cards with higher fees. So you almost want to think of the card as it has multiple purposes, right? You can spend on it. It gives you a credit limit, which means you can borrow. It's got the points feature, which means you can earn points from it. And it's also got these perks and benefits, which is almost like a membership, essentially. So like the Amex cards, some of them are like, $695 annual fee. It's very expensive, but it comes with all of these cool perks. So you get lounge access whenever you're traveling. You've got access to the Amex Centurion lounges. You've got access to Delta lounges when you fly on Delta if you have this card. You get access to what's called Priority Pass, which is a global network of over 1,300 different airport lounges. That's just one perk, right? So if you're traveling once a month and you're going to be in an airport several times, that's basically, you think about it. Okay, it's a round trip flight. That means once a month is like 24 flights a year. That could be 24 free meals. So you'd say 30, 40 bucks a meal. That already almost covers that fee, right? If you were to break it out like that. Then you've got things like hotel credits and Uber credits. You've got things like covering Clear, which is like the fast track for airport security. You've got TSA and global entry credits that allows you to get back in the country faster or to go through security faster as well. So if you start to maximize all of these, then this annual fee, actually, you would look at it like an investment, really, kind of like you said. You may see a card that has a $395 annual fee, which if you only look at the cost, you're like, oh, that's an expensive card. But if you look at the benefits, it's like every year, if I use even a little bit of this stuff, I'm getting $700-800 worth of value. So why wouldn't you do that, right? Now, what happens is as you start to get more cards and you get really into this game, like I have like 37 credit cards, some of these fees and the benefits will start to overlap. So you have to be really cognizant and really track, like, okay, if this one gets this lounge access and this one also gets the same lounge access, I only need it on one card. So there's kind of a duplicate benefit. So now I can't use that card to its full maximum because I'm using the same benefit on another card. So that's how you want to think about it. Now, what you can also do, which is really cool, there's a lot of cards that kind of like cars, there's like different tiers in a family, right? And so you could basically get a card and maybe get a new sign-up bonus, which is a huge way to earn a lot of points, which we can touch on, and it will have a higher fee. But after the first year, you could downgrade that card to the no fee version of the card. And that way you can keep the credit history building, you can keep your credit line good, you can set up auto pay so things are not risky for your credit. And then all of a sudden you're building good credit, you got the bonus points, and you're not paying the annual fee. And you can continue to do that. Again, knowing if you know how credit works, you can continue to do that in a process that will actually help improve your credit score. It will earn you tons of points. It'll reduce the fees and will allow you to do it in a way that's, again, not going to be this crazy mind-consuming project, right? If you have a good system for it, it can be simplified. But that's what's available, and that's how you can start to really do like advanced level, what we call travel hacking. That's ultimately what it is maximizing, kind of playing this fun system of loyalty points and credit card points and all that stuff to be able to get amazing travel experiences. So that's a little bit more than just about the fees, but that's ultimately what you're able to do if you start to maximize the benefits of the cards a little better.
I know travel hacking is a big thing that's very trending. You see so many influencers and YouTubers, from Hyatt to what other ways of the travel hacking. But do you think that people who, like, say in my case, I'm kind of like a newbie to that. Should I understand how credit works before trying travel hacking?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, you need to understand that stuff, because if you just start to apply for cards randomly, you're likely to maybe get some approvals, but maybe you're not going to get credit limits that you actually want. And then maybe you do get that, but then you start to see your score go down because you weren't looking at all sorts of different cards, right? There's even business credit cards, which is some really cool facts about that. Most people don't know this stuff, but business credit cards don't show up in your personal credit report, actually, right? And you don't even have to have an LLC to get to apply for a business credit card. You can apply as a sole proprietor, which means you just use your social security number. You don't even have to set up a legal entity. So you, as Tennie, you could basically apply for a business card and say, hey, this is my sole proprietor business. Maybe you babysit and you get paid, I don't know, a couple times a month for that. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but you could apply for a business credit card to keep business expenses there. And those cards can have other bonuses, right? So you want to understand some of these foundations of how, again, your credit score works, even business versus personal credit a little bit if you can, to figure out how do you then piece together your strategy to maximize towards your goals while making sure that everything you're doing stays really good, your credit stays intact.
That's interesting, because I was also looking into a business credit card for my travel business. And I think a lot of whoever are starting off as travel advisors and want to, have their travel business, they really should put, it's really advised to get a business travel card, credit card. So let's start off with that. And this is for all the travel advisors, whether you're starting off, maybe advise people like me who is a new travel advisor. What business credit card should we get to fund our business?
Great question. So here's the way you want to think about it, right? So we talked about those steps. So first step is maximize your credit score and understand the rules. Second step is earn the right points. So we want to look at that first, because if we just say, hey, just get this card, you're missing the process. So let's kind of go through here. So you want to earn ideally the points that you can get the most value out of, because all of them are again like different currencies. And if you look at it, there's really four main different types of points. There's airline points, air miles. There's hotel points. There's what we call transferable bank points. I'm going to explain that. And then there's non-transferable bank points. So airline miles and hotel points are pretty self-explanatory. The bank points can be a little bit confusing. So there's really four main banks, which are Chase, Amex, Citi, and Capital One, that if you earn these points, you can actually convert them from that bank point into an airline mile or into a hotel point, because they have all these partnerships. When you do that, it gives you a lot more opportunity to get really good value out of your points. Whereas these non-transferable bank points, for example, Wells Fargo or US Bank, you can't convert them to anything. So they basically have like a fixed value. They're like, hey, you get 1 cent per point, right? And you can't get more than that. But when you convert them to airline points or airline miles or hotel points, you can get way more than that. So that's step one, is figure out what points you want. So let's just say those four would be the ones you want to start with: Chase, Citi, Amex, and Capital One. Now you look at, how do I maximize the amount of points I can earn of these points? And you would think, what do I spend a lot of money on? And which cards at these banks give me the highest return for that type of spend? So that's why it's different for everybody. There's not just a one size fits all card. But assuming these travel advisors are traveling a lot and travel is a big expense for them, that would be a card that you would definitely look for, right? You'd look for what card earns the most amount of points for travel. So a couple of good ones: the Amex Platinum card would get you 5x points on airfare when you purchase airfare through the Amex travel portal, if you do that. Okay, if you book general travel, the Chase Sapphire Reserve, that's a personal card, will get you 3 points per dollar spent on travel that way. Okay, you can get the Chase Ink Preferred is another great card for that. There's quite a few. And then the Amex Business Gold would be another good one. That'll get you 4x points on certain purchases. But you ultimately want to look at, what do I spend the most on in my business? What do I spend the most on in my personal life? And which cards are going to be the best fit for that?
Also, would you suggest that, like, if you get a credit card, you should get one separate, like a business one and one for personal, or can you do get one that has all in one, as long as you are educated properly and have self-control and discipline?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I definitely suggest getting one for your business at least, and then one at least for your personal. So you want to separate those expenses if you can, because for bookkeeping and taxes, it's easier. And you're going to have different bonus categories that are more important for each one. Like, so again, if you do a lot of groceries for personal, you want to get a card that's really good for groceries, like the Amex Gold. If you don't buy any groceries, but you spend a lot on advertising for your business card, you want to get a card that's really good for advertising. So there's all these different categories. So you'd want to think of it like that. Ideally, you have at least a few cards for each personal and business. Like I would suggest having probably 2 to 3 for business and 2 to 3 for personal. And that's not a crazy amount. Like 6 credit cards isn't an insane amount. You can keep that organized pretty easily, but that'll give you a good way to be able to maximize your points earnings on these different types of purchases. So that's kind of my recommendation. You don't necessarily need to apply for all 6 today. You could do that a little bit over time, and again, hit those bonuses as you sign up for them, which is the juiciest way to get points. But that's what I would be doing if I was thinking about that. I have, as I mentioned, like high 30s in terms of the number of credit cards. I only really use 4 to 5 on a day-to-day basis. So it's not like I'm using all those all the time, but I have a bunch.
Well, I read a lot. I know Points Guy has his list of like the best travel cards, Forbes, Condé Nast. I want to know your best travel cards and that you recommend for people. So let's get down to like one of your favorites and explain which.
Sure.
How.
Yeah, I'll give you my top few here. So these are going to be a mix of personal and business cards, really mostly personal cards is where we'll start. But I really like the Chase Sapphire Reserve because I like the value I can get out of Chase points. They're really, really valuable. And it earns 3x points on a lot of good categories and is really good for actual travel purchases. It also gets all the lounge access benefits and all that stuff. So that's going to be the first one. Chase Sapphire Reserve is a great card. The next one's going to be the Capital One Venture X, because the Capital One Venture X gets you 2 points per dollar on any purchase. So normally when you purchase something that's not a category bonus, meaning it's not groceries or dining or travel or something like that, let's just say you're at a CVS or you are buying something with an online store, I don't know, Dick's Sporting Goods, right? the Capital One Venture X will earn 2 points per dollar, where almost every other card earns 1 point on non-category purchases. So you just double the amount of points you're getting on all of these purchases that you're making that aren't going to fit into another category. So that's a really good one. It gives you like kind of just, we call it increasing the floor that you're earning on, right? Like instead of earning 1 point, you're earning 2 points in everything at least. So that's that one. And the Amex Gold is another really good one. Now the Amex Gold is great, and it's often very confusing because the Platinum is like the highest, most fancy card for Amex cards. But what happens is the Platinum is actually really good for the perks and benefits piece and for purchasing travel, but it's not good for dining, groceries, and everyday expenses. Whereas the Gold card is really good because it earns 4 points per dollar on that. So those are my top three for personal cards. And then again, for the business, it totally varies based on what you spend on. But I really like the Chasing Preferred and the Chasing Unlimited. The Chasing Preferred is better for earning points on high category spends for my business. And the Chasing Unlimited earns a kind of similar to the Capital One Venture X, will give you a higher earning on anything you spend on. So it gives you 1.5 points per dollar on everything. So it doesn't matter if it's a category bonus or not, you're getting 1.5 points. So it's a great card for that.
Now, do you recommend anyone to have, like, you know, how like Hilton has a credit card, Marriott, and then some airlines have their JetBlue, Delta?
Yep.
Would you recommend anyone to have those types of credit cards for travel?
Yeah. So I generally always recommend people start with the bank cards that I was talking about. It can make sense to earn points with an airline too. There's a couple of situations where this makes sense. If you're like near a big hub and you always fly one airline, or you're going for status, or you travel a lot and like you only fly Delta, right? Then yes, it can make sense to get a Delta card and get some of the benefits, maybe get the free bags and stuff like that. But in the instance for most people, you want to start with those bank cards first because they give you more options. So here's the thing, right? If you get a Delta card and you earn a bunch of Delta miles, but then you want to fly American Airlines because it's a better direct flight, you got no options if you only have Delta points. So if you have these other bank points, you could still fly with American if that comes up, or you could fly with United, or you can fly with JetBlue. You can fly with any airline or any hotel if you have these flexible points. So that's why we want to start there. So once you have that built up and you've got a good amount of those that you feel comfortable with, then yeah, sure, it could make sense to start to get some airline cards and hotel cards. The big benefit there, specifically on the hotel side, is you can start to get status pretty easily with some of these hotel cards too.
Nice. Now, I'm curious, how many places have you traveled in the world, and how do you use your credit cards when you travel?
Yeah. So I've been to 40 different countries, which has been amazing. Super fortunate and blessed to be able to have done that. And some of them been to many times, like Spain and Germany and Netherlands, been to like each of those, I think like 8 or 10 times. So I've traveled quite a bit for the last several years. And I use points pretty much every single time I'm going. Whenever I'm flying on a big international flight, I'm always using points to book a business or first class ticket. That's the only way I do it. Now, I used to not do that, right? When I was first getting started, it was like any kind of free trip was amazing. I would do that. And it's not that you're better than anyone or anything like that. But once you start to travel like that, you don't want to go back. That's just the reality. Like everyone that gets a bed and you get the champagne experience, you get the lounge, nice hot towels, especially these international airlines. And you experience that and you're like, wow, I just did that for $6 and some points. I don't want to go back to sitting in economy and paying for it, right? So you get addicted. And that's what happened for me is I had a couple of trips where I did that and I was like, I'm hooked. So that's what I'm doing. I'll use them sometimes for hotels, but it's harder to get as good value out of the points for hotels. So I don't do that as much, but sometimes I do for some nicer ones. Like I was in Sardinia, Italy, and I stayed at this beautiful Hyatt property resort. And it was like, the room was like $3,000 a night. And we used points and it only, we did 4 nights there and it was only 120,000 points. And if you're not familiar with how points work, you could get one card that could earn you 120,000 points from signing up. So you could get that one card and use it. And I got a $12,000 value stay out of those points. So really, really cool if you start to do it for stuff like that. But the biggest, fastest use that I'll use it for is these international business and first class flights. That's the easiest way to get good value out of the points and to get an experience that you'd normally never want to pay cash for. A lot of times, you're flying to Europe or Asia or even South America. You're looking at $3,000, $4,000, sometimes $10,000, $15,000 for one seat for one direction. And so to be able to do that and use points for that and really just hardly pay any cash, it's awesome. So that's usually where I focus.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's also an awesome strategy because you mentioned about economy. Trust me, I'm so done with the economy. I don't want to, especially on a long flight, I don't want to hear babies crying
Yeah.
next to somebody who's a little bit overweight and they're snoring.
Yeah.
I mean, you do want to sit on first class, especially like on a long flight, first class, business class, where you actually want peace of mind and you want to have that comfort. And that's just a way of why we should have have a travel credit card. But as what I mentioned, you have to learn you have to have good credit, you have to learn how to strategize and so forth. I do want to ask you, Eli, where is one of the most memorable places that you've gone using those perks that
yeah, Japan is always the country that I think of the most when I get asked that question. The experience over there is amazing, just like the culture and the food and the way the society works. It's so fascinating. And they have a lot of great options for really cool business and first class flights going over there. So last time I flew to Japan, I flew American Airlines business class over, which was really good. I flew from Dallas. So it was like a 13-hour flight and it cost me $6. And it was just like really, really crazy. But the ticket price, if I was going to pay cash, would have been probably like $6,000 or $7,000. So to be able to do that was awesome. And they've got a bunch of really nice hotels. Like even the hospitality there is so high class that when you go and you get these experiences, it's just like amazing from start to finish in terms of how gracious they are, how welcoming, respectful. And it's a really cool society from that standpoint. So that's one of them for sure. I did fly over to Dubai, actually. That was a really cool one. I flew Emirates first class on this one. And this was going from JFK to Dubai. And on this one, they actually have a shower and a bar for the first class section on that. Well, the bar for business class or first class. The shower is only for first class. So you get to take a shower at 35,000 feet. They have an unlimited menu with like all sorts of food. You can order whatever you want, whenever you want. Fancy wines and champagnes and all that stuff. And that was just a totally lavish experience, like really cool. And that was super fun. Dubai was a wild time. It's just a crazy city. It's a really cool to experience that too. But that was the most iconic flight that I've taken for sure, was that one. It would have been, I think, $15,000 if I were to pay cash. And then based on getting the right points and transferring them from the banks to the airlines, it was only 136,000 points and then like $500 in cash. So you basically, able to get a $15,000 ticket off of, again, you could earn 136,000 points from getting almost one single credit card sometimes. So if you do it right and you know how this game works, you can do stuff like that. It's not always super simple to figure that out. Sometimes it can be, but sometimes it can be more complicated. So it just depends on again, your situation.
And that's great. You paid $500 and you're able to shower.
Yeah, it was great. It was so cool.
That's one of my goals. When you said, I was like, wow, shower. I was like, I know when I go to the Philippines, the first thing I want to do is shower. I feel, I think when you're in a long flight, like you feel grossed out because of the air, your skin, but to have to do that, you can do that on an airplane, as long as you know how to play the game right, you easily can do that. You don't need to wait 18 hours to take your last shower that you had before you left home.
Totally.
And I do want to ask you one more thing before we end this podcast is, we're winding down to 2022. Do you have any goals or resolutions or travel plans for 2023? And what do you suggest where we should go and maybe utilize or get that credit card, and where we should use those perks, start using those perks?
Yeah, well, it's a great question because you should plan ahead. That's the biggest mistake a lot of people make is, or one of them is, they don't plan ahead enough. And so they don't have enough points when they want to book the trip. So you would think, okay, I want to travel next summer. Okay, well, if you want to use points, you need to have enough points to book it. Let's say you want to book 3 months out. So it's a July trip. It means you're booking in March. Well, if you want to book in March, it means you have to have enough points then, which means you need to potentially get cards now, because these sign-up bonuses, for example, they'll say, hey, after you spend $4,000 in the first 90 days, we're going to give you 60,000 points. And if you want to use those, well, if it takes you 90 days to hit the spend, you need to start now, because you're in November, right? You'd be basically in February before you get the point. So that's a great point, is to think about what are some of the travel goals you have and how do I reverse engineer them now and set myself up to win today? So great question to ask. I do have a few pretty big trips on the docket so far. I'm going to Chamonix, France in the end of February for a ski trip. So that'd be really cool. I've never been to Chamonix before, so I'm excited for that one. And that one should continue on to be some other sort of adventure. I'm still working out the pieces for that. So that'll be a good one. And then going to Greece, that'll be a first-time country for me. I've never been to Greece, actually. It's one of my last remaining like major European countries that I haven't been to that I've wanted to go to. So that's going to be in May. And that's about as far as I've planned out so far. A couple other small trips here and there before that. But yeah, the big ones for me are going to be those. At some point, I really want to take like a full month off and just go explore New Zealand, and then also take a couple weeks in Iceland, and in Argentina and Colombia are big ones too. But I want to, for some of these, my goal is to go a little bit slower. I've done a lot of fast-paced travel. So for me, that's kind of the difference, is how do I go places and really just like slow down and fully enjoy, and, take a little bit lighter work periods when I'm there, and just enjoy where I'm at. That's a big part of it, because I tend to go really fast-paced, and sometimes you miss the experience a little bit. If you're traveling and you're doing a bunch of different things, you're not really fully present. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And once you get older too, you can't do like everything smack into one. You have to kind of like take your time and just take in everything. And I do recommend, I love Greece. And one thing you have to have two things you have to have in Greece in terms of food is loukoumades.
Okay.
And then you have to have the gyro on the street. And plus they have really great seafood, especially in Santorini.
Nice.
Yeah. Gyro. And I'll never forget this, because this is where I first established shrimp gyro, because they don't really sell, it's mostly pork or chicken.
Right.
And then literally when I came home, I started making shrimp gyro. And then, here in New York, and there's a huge Greek community not far from where I live.
Cool.
They started selling it, but I know like in the United States, you probably won't ever see like shrimp gyro unless unless somebody's traveled to Greece. Right.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm excited for that one. I've been wanting to go I love Greek food. Mediterranean cuisine in general is like my favorite. So I'm getting hungry thinking about it.
And I'm gonna let you go and eat.
Yeah.
And Eli, this is actually great. This is kind of like financial literacy for travelers. I've learned a lot. Now I know what I have to do to earn to get those credit cards. I know I want the Chase Sapphire, and Amex has been one of my goals for the longest time. And I know, knowing that you really have to work hard on your credit to get an Amex card. And I just want to, sit on Centurion lounges and eat.
There you go. Yeah. And it can be easier than you think, right? You do have to work on it, but it doesn't have to be like like if you do the right things, it can be really simple. So I just want people to know that, because it can seem overwhelming. I gotta fix my credit. I gotta learn all this stuff. I gotta do this, and then I have to apply, and then I have to get the points. I have to figure out how to use them. It can seem like a lot. Just keep it simple and start small. Just do one or two things, improve your credit, see where you get, then try and find, simply the best card that you can think of based on what we described, those 5 steps. Go through that, figure out the best 1 or 2 cards that you can get, and then start with that. I wouldn't overwhelm trying to learn yourself, or wouldn't overwhelm yourself by trying to learn every point system and hotel brand and airline. Unless you're fascinated by anything, it's fun, then go for it. But a lot of people jump in, it gets too overwhelming, so they end up not doing anything. And like overwhelm can lead to inaction. So you don't want to have that. You want to just basically keep it simple enough where you're going to keep going and start there. And then as you start to get the benefits and the experience, your curiosity is going to kick in, and you're probably going to be like, this was really cool. I want to learn more. So that's generally how it goes for everybody. So that's what I suggest, is starting small and going from there.
Great. That's awesome. Awesome nuggets. Awesome education. Thank you, Eli, for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, Tennie, for having me.
And thank you to our viewers, because without your support, this would be impossible, and you wouldn't learn how to travel wiser if you didn't learn all these things, especially with travel credit cards. Smart People Travel Wise airs every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 noon Pacific. I'm Tennie Sumague. Catch you all next time. Take care.
From your PHLV radio family, Merry Christmas and all the best in the coming year.
Merry Christmas from your friends at PHLV Radio.
Just like a friend from back home. This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.